Just
Thanks. Okay. So good morning, everybody. Welcome back to those of you who've attended one or two of our previous Rock the Recovery webinars. Welcome to those who've not attended one before. My name's Pete Evans. I'm the Managing Director of SalesStar UK. And this morning we're going to be talking about the importance of having a robust sales process. I'd like to welcome my colleagues. First of all, I'd like to introduce Alex Chan, who is the Head of Global Learning for SalesStar, and he's dialing in from Auckland in New Zealand. So welcome, Alex. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Peter. It's good to be here joining the team at the UK. But I must say, Peter, you're showing your age by saying that I'm dialing in. I did, in fact, log on. But good to be here and good to join the UK team and our friends who have logged on today to figure out how to rock this recovery. Thanks, Pete. Okay,
and also joined by Peter Cooper, who Alex has logged in from sunny St Albans. So Peter, would you like to say a warm welcome to everybody?
Yes, thank you, Pete. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us today. Yeah, I work as part of the SalesStar team as one of the high performance coaches here in the UK. And as Pete's rightly highlighted, live in St Albans near London. However, with the beauty of screens nowadays, can sell and work with clients across the UK.
And finally, so not finally, we're also joined by Kath Edmonds. Kath is part of the UK sales team. So Kath, would you like to say a few words to everybody?
Yeah, of course. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kath. I'm the sales development leader for SalesStar UK. I'm delighted to see you all on the webinar this morning. Please do get involved in the questioning. So make sure
SalesStar Team UK
into the box at the bottom saying all panelists and all attendees.
And we also have a late joiner to our panel, the CEO of SalesStar Global, Paul O'Donoghue. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself to the attendees this morning?
I think Paul's just working on his microphone, so
right. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to pass over to Alex, who's going to be leading the webinar this morning in conjunction with myself, Peter Cooper, and Kath. So over to you, Alex.
Well, thank you very much, Pete, and thank you very much, team. All right, so the reason that you've probably logged on today, I would imagine, is because you want to figure out how to get some tools to rock this recovery, to actually get through what I call the COVID-19 economy, and all of the issues and challenges and even the opportunities that it brings. And I wonder, for those of you who have not been with us before, those of you who have been with us before, you may recognize this slide, but for those of you who haven't been with us before, do any of these bullet points describe you? Are your sales going down perhaps? Are you experiencing deals that have been stalled? Maybe a little bit unsure about the future with various parts of Europe and even the South Pacific going in and out of lockdown again. What does the future bring? Have you discovered that some of your customers are doing a little bit of slashing and burning and they're trying to cut their expenditure and you've been taking the brunt of that as their supplier? You find that a lot of prospects are too busy. Maybe they're in damage control and so it's pretty hard to get hold of them. Or maybe because of the lockdown that we spoke of, maybe people are sort of frozen in terms of their ability to do business. Have your leads dried up? If any of those things apply to you, then you've come to the right place because we're spending this entire series, including this episode, figuring out ways that we can get around this and turning the current situation into an opportunity. All right, now, once again, those of you who have joined us in the previous sessions, you may recall that we've used an analogy of a desert. Now, what I've decided to do is I've likened the COVID economy, as I call it, to being in the middle of the desert. It's like business is dried up, just like all plant life is dried up in the desert. There's no water, there's no business, there's little cash coming in. You know what? If we crawl out the other side, we might make it. But even if we do make it, we've got nothing left in many cases. There's no water left, there's no food left, we're sunburnt to a crisp. And you know what? It's a little bit like that with businesses that come out the other side of a recessionary period. We're not technically in recession yet, but I do know that a lot are behaving as though they are in a recessionary period. That being said, are we going to crawl out? Have we got anything left? Have we got any money left? Have we let all our staff go? If that's the case, then maybe we can't take advantage of the recovery because all of our resources have been gone. And to my panelists, you know, don't you, that I've been putting this image up there from a movie. Pete and Peter and Kath, you're probably very familiar with the plot of Flight of the Phoenix, even though you've probably never seen the movie yet. Is that right, Pete Evans?
It certainly is, and I think it's just an encouragement to actually watch the film as well, Alex. You know, and I think it's a great reminder about the mindset that's required in challenging times, and we're certainly living in some challenging times. And I think you can either take the flight away from what's going on, or you can actually flip your mindset on its head and see what's happening in the world as a real opportunity to grow sales.
Yeah, indeed. Peter Cooper, can you by any chance remember the plot of this movie, even though you haven't seen it?
I can. From what I recall, we've got a scenario where clearly there's been a bit of a crash. A plane's in pieces. Everybody is panicking. What do we do? How do we survive? Do we go north, south, east, west? What's the quickest way to fix this? And then we have a little bright spark who's able to go, hang on, maybe there are enough pieces of this plane that we can put it all back together again. And and with a little bit of strategy, planning, hard work, effort, and teamwork, the guys build the plane. Do they get out of the desert? I couldn't possibly be a spoiler and tell the outcome, surely.
Well, I'm going to be a spoiler. They do build another plane and they fly out of the desert. And that's where our analogy kicks in. If you're in a COVID-19 desert, you can either try to crawl out, or you can sit there and try to wait for the rain to come. Or you can say, look, we're going to take some strategic, proactive action here. We're going to, figuratively speaking, fly out of the desert. So if you want to take some strategic, proactive action, this is flying lesson number, what are we up to? Number 4, is it, gentlemen?
Number 3.
Number 3, it's flying lesson number 3. And with that in mind, let's do our first poll, and let's get the pulse of the audience, shall we, Kath? As you can see, the question is, how's your sales forecast? Number 1, I'm going up, yay. Stable, which means, yeah, okay, I'm calm. Trending down, are your sales trending down? Okay, well then maybe you're thinking I'm concerned. Wow, if they're going through the floor, maybe you need therapy. People, give us an honest answer. Kath has launched the polls. Tell us what you really think. Remember, you've got the protection of anonymity, so we don't know who's answering what. But tell us how you really feel. How's sales going on out there? How's your forecasting looking? Kath, are the results coming in? Are the answers coming in?
Yeah, we're up to 88%. So just a couple, a few more votes that need to come in to make sure we get right
okay.
to 100%.
Let's see if we can get it at least over 90. We'll give them 5 seconds, shall we, Kath? 5, 4, 3. Let's close those polls, Kath. And if you'd like to share the answers with us, please, the results.
Yes, of course. So at 46% coming in at the top is going up, which is very, very positive. We have 17% of the...
Can you actually share that with us by any chance, Kath?
Yes, so bear with me 1 second.
There it is.
So going up 46% of individuals on the webinar. 17% are stable, which is very, very good. We do have 33% that are concerned, though, trending down. And then we do have 4% of the attendees who are unfortunately going through the floor with their sales.
Yeah, hey, look, 4%, that's still a lot of people. But you know what the funny thing is, to my panelists, is that there seems to be quite a number who've said sales are going up. That's fantastic news. But by the same token, there's another quite a large group of people there that representing 1/3 of the people logged on right now who say actually it's trending down. So there seems to be a bit of a contrast there between what people are experiencing. Pete Cooper, could I ask you for some comment or for some analysis, please?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. I think that there have certainly been differences in some organizations. I know Louise has mentioned in the chat about teams on furlough and the impact that's had on the sales pipeline and working through. And Louise, I've been working with a team in the license trade, and I definitely recognize that going through a period of furlough makes a psychological change to the team, but also from a sales forecasting point of view, yeah, basically you are going to need to start again, not just because of the furlough, but because the customer's business are starting all over again, and it's a new exploration, and therefore, importantly, good high quality qualification of our customers, whether it's existing ones who need help and or are able to spend more, or prospect customers. That's also going to be really important. And as we go through this morning, you'll see the value of high quality qualification of your customers. So yeah, it's a fair point, and definitely furlough is real, has affected a number of sales teams. And yeah, that may well have given a small blip as people have come back to work and now trending down.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, what's going on in New Zealand, we're actually seeing a general pickup in the internal economy, unless, of course, you're in the travel or hospitality business. So we would probably know which ones would pick which answers in that particular poll. Pete Evans, any comment or analysis from you on what our audience is saying?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on what Peter said, I think we've seen some clients where, you know, they've had their sales staff on furlough and they're coming back to work and they've seen an upwards trend in terms of sales. But I think one of the things that we're talking to our clients about is how do you make that upward trend sustainable? Because I think, you know, certainly there's been an appetite for people to spend money during the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks in the UK as people have been coming out of furlough and going back to work and the economy's picking up. But I think, you know, just looking at the trending down, you know, I'm concerned 33% of people on the webinar have answered that. I think you can take steps to stop the trend down, and it comes back to having a process, making sure that you're qualifying opportunities, and, you know, coming back to Louise's point about the pipeline. I think this is about owning the space, but I think we've seen in our own business the importance of having a robust sales process, which is what we're going to talk about further.
And that is indeed what we're going to talk about, yes.
It's great to see, you know, how positive people are about, you know, sales are going up. I think the challenge is, how do you make that sales growth sustainable? Is that sales growth just because, you know, your customers haven't been spending and then suddenly they're spending a lot of money with you?
Okay. Well, look, you know, to those to the 46% who say, look, sales are going up, and to the 17% who say, look, it's stable, thank you for joining us anyway. Hopefully we'll be able to give you some extra tools to keep it that way, and maybe even to improve it, make it even a little bit better. For the significant number of us, 33% who say, look, it's trending down, and 4% who say, look, it's going through the floor, the same sentiment applies. We certainly hope that we can give you some tools to reverse that trend, or at least to curb that trend, so that it's not such a hard landing. All right, so stay with us over the next hour, and we promise you that we will be able to share some ideas with you, which I'm absolutely certain will be able to help. Thanks, Kath. If you'd like to close that now, then we can move on to the next order of business. And that brings us to this morning's subject. It's tonight in New Zealand. This morning's subject, which is the flyout strategy number 3, and it's on the subject of strategy. Now, whether you're in sales or whether you're in management, this certainly applies to you either way. And when it comes to strategy, I'd like to share with you what we call at SalesStar the success equation. There it is in front of you. As you can see, it says success equals clarity times activity times effectiveness. You know, salespeople, you're the ones who have to put in the activity. That is your responsibility. You've got to make those calls. You've got to do the proposals. You've got to get hold of your customers. That's the activity. SalesStar can help you with the effectiveness by improving your sales effectiveness, improving your skills. And a combination of SalesStar and leaders, those of you who are logged on, we must help to provide the clarity so that our salespeople know exactly what they need to do in order to navigate the COVID economy. Leaders, we can help you, but ultimately that message needs to come from you, that clarity that your salespeople need. All right, so we're going to take a look at more in terms of clarity, in terms of strategy today. And if you want to know how to get through the COVID economy, if you want to know how to rock this recovery, then you're looking at the answer right now. What you're looking at is the SalesStar 9-step high-performance pathway. And today, we're going to be focusing our attention on step number 3, which is the sales process. All right, so on that basis, Kath, I'd like to launch another poll, and I just want to once again get a gauge on where our audience is at the moment. As you can see there, the question is, have you noticed changes in buyer behavior? Now, this is an important question because in the GFC that went from 2008 to 2012, we did see changes in buyer behavior. So if you'd like to just give us your feedback now as to what you're seeing. Answer number 1, no, it's business as usual. Number 2, yes, buyers have disengaged completely, particularly if they're on furlough. Number 3, yes, everything's on hold and decisions are slower. And number 4, yes, they're asking for more concessions. In other words, they're trying to negotiate with you to try to save some money. All right, so those are the choices that you've got in front of you. Just pick the answer that sort of is the closest one to what you're experiencing out there. All right, Kath, are the answers coming in?
Yeah, really interesting, Alex, actually. So the majority, so we're up to 70% of the attendees are on, yes, everything's on hold, decisions are slower. So that is the overriding choice at the moment.
All right, let's just, we've got about 70%. Let's give them another 5 seconds and we'll close the polls and maybe you can share that visually with us. So we'll give you 5, 4, 3, and if we could get those answers up there and the results there. Thanks, Kath. This is really good, isn't it, panel, just to get the pulse of the viewership? Yeah. Okay, definitely. So Pete Evans, maybe I'll get you to start this time. There is the result. Can I get some comment from you, please, on what is the mood of our audience?
Yeah, I think really interesting that 64% who responded have said that everything's on hold, decisions are slower. I think, Alex, we've talked about, during the last 3 to 4 months since, the UK went into lockdown, the decision-making process of organisations is getting slower. More people are getting involved in the decision-making process. And I think this just demonstrates the importance of having a robust process and understanding how buyers are making decisions. I mean, if I could just share with you a couple of instances from clients we're dealing with. We got one client that's in the global space where the chief commercial officer said every spending decision has to go to the CEO.
So they're escalating it up, which means it's taking longer.
Yeah, prior to COVID, the chief commercial officer could sign off budgets himself. So we're seeing organisations large and small where the decisions are taking longer. And obviously, I think what you're having to do is you've got to demonstrate more than ever the value that you're bringing as well. And I think,
carry on, Pete.
Yeah, what we are noticing is that more and more the finance directors are getting involved in more and more in the decision-making process.
Yes.
And then that looks at things like budgets and things being rolled out.
Interesting observation there, Pete. What you were saying about decisions getting escalated up, whereas people before, they used to have delegation of authority to make these decisions themselves. Now, under the current situation, you were saying that the CFO is getting more involved and they're having to escalate decisions up. This is exactly the same pattern that we saw with buyer behavior during the GFC, the global financial crisis. And quick comment from you, Peter Cooper. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think they're highlighting the point around buyers have disengaged completely zero. That also shows that businesses that our people on the webinar are working with don't want to stop engaging completely. They are keen to continue to work with us, but the frustration is it's going to be very different. And so the old sales process, pre-COVID, pre-recession times, isn't going to match the current buyer process. And what Pete was just highlighting, we must understand what our buyers' process now are so that we can adapt our sales process in order to match and do the best job we can for our customers.
That is a very good analysis, Peter, and I agree. Things have changed in the last 3 months, which means we've got to relook at our process because that might not be current with the changes that we've seen in recent times. Thank you for that, Pete, and thank you for that, Peter. Thanks, Kath. If we could just close that poll now. Interesting, 64% said that everything was on hold. That's a lot of people. All right, so let's talk about a bit more, panelists, about that sales process now. Look, do we have a sales process? And if so, look, that's great. There's an advantage to that. There's a lot of research that shows that if we've got a very, very well-written process that people actually implement, that can actually impact our sales. But Peter Cooper, you were saying that, look, things have changed. And you might experience an escalation upwards. Peter Evans, you were saying that, weren't you?
Yeah.
That's, like I said, that's exactly what we saw in the GFC. Same buyer behavior is repeating itself here. You might experience extended sales cycles. Gentlemen, both of you were saying that. And sure enough, that's what you're finding locally. And also you might have to convince multiple stakeholders. Can I get a comment on that one about multiple stakeholders? You talk about escalating decisions up. during times like this. The people there in the UK finding that they're having to deal with more than just one stakeholder, more than one decision maker? Are they having to deal with entire committees increasingly?
Yeah, Alex, I think I've noticed with some customers that people who used to feel confident making decisions and spending money are now more nervous about making a mistake. And it's that kind of fear that drives them to want to make decisions by committee. And therefore, I think for newer purchases and or different purchases that buyers are looking to make, they really do need to feel confident that they're going to get great value. And so a value sale must be the priority from us to our clients. Otherwise, if it's just here's a new thing, here's a price, it's highly unlikely that people are going to buy without, in their own isolation, without having to therefore get multiple people involved.
Indeed. Just taking a look at that bullet point just below the halfway mark, it says there, you might find it harder to make appointments. I wonder how many of our viewers have encountered that, because I keep referring back to what we learned during the global financial crisis. What we learned is that it was harder to get in front of people, and you might be wondering what's the reason for that. The reason is very simple. A lot of companies have made people redundant, sadly. And because they've downsized, it means that there are fewer people, meaning that the ones who are left they get super busy because they're doing the job of about 3 or 4 other people. And that is why it's harder to get hold of them. And it's really hard to tie them down to actually see us or to see them to make an appointment. Can I get a comment from Pete Evans on that particular point? Pete, what's the pulse of your clients there in terms of finding it hard to tie people down to an appointment?
Yeah, I mean, in sort of talking to our clients, what they're saying is that the people they're selling to are getting busier because there's less people. I think we've also got a comment from Terry, which I'd like to pick on it. And what Terry's saying is that their competitors' salespeople are going out visiting, visiting stockists. But I think what salespeople have to learn and sales leaders is that there's a different way of communicating with your customers. And I think the one thing that your customers are looking for is, if you're in selling, you've got to demonstrate the value you're going to bring. I think people are busier. I think people are feeling a bit fatigued because of, having been in lockdown, people sort of going back to it. But I think, you've just got to focus on demonstrating value to your customers. If it's hard to get through to people, differentiate yourself from the competition by it's not just, dropping in to see somebody, but actually, if I'm going to have a conversation with you, I'm going to bring some real value to you. I think that's the key thing.
I think that is key, to be able to sell on value. When times are plenty, a lot of people can sell. Even people who are not particularly good can sell. But when times get tough and when the economy really, really tests our mettle, that is when you can really set out the pros from the amateurs. For example, any amateur can say, Pete, can I come and quote? Who's your current supplier? Can we quote? Isn't that a pretty common approach?
Definitely.
Yeah, and of course that commoditizes everything, which means it always comes down to price. But a pro might approach on the basis of value and say, Peter, we've been talking to a lot of chief executives like yourselves who are very concerned with the effect that supply chain disruption has had on their business. Do you think I might get engagement from you if I talked about something like that?
Yeah, well, I know that I know Paul O'Donoghue, CEO, talks about what's the definition of consultative selling, and actually it's about enhancing customer profits. So if you're sort of selling through distributors or stockists, have a conversation about how you're going to help them, rather than just being the salesperson who just shows up for a conversation. And I think also what COVID has taught a lot of organizations who are selling is that you've got an opportunity to be really disruptive. It's an opportunity to do something different. It doesn't always have to be about popping in to see somebody. You can use the technology that we're using to have really great value conversations with your customers.
Yeah, indeed. So, it says there, the second to last bullet point, due to lockdown, you might have to rethink the way you meet clients. And hopefully with the example that I shared with you, that's a little bit different to, hey, can we quote? in any case. But Pete Cooper, I wonder if I could get a remark from you on that last comment there. What we found during the GFC is that everybody was sort of tightening the purse strings, and they were told by their management team they've got to cut discretionary expenditure. And so as a result, a lot of suppliers found themselves in negotiations because buyers were trying to get savings out of the suppliers. That's us, the salespeople. What's going on there at the moment? Are you seeing much of that with your clients?
Yeah, I think the point you mentioned earlier about in an easy time, salespeople, anyone can sell. From a buyer's point of view, in an easy time, anyone can buy. When the going gets tough, the tough buyers are going to start asking tough questions. They're going to start asking and demanding much better deals from their suppliers. And if we as salespeople aren't ready for that, haven't asked the right high quality questions as part of our discovery calls, haven't anticipated the objections that are coming, then we're not in a great place to respond productively to when those challenges come. So yeah, we're getting into a tougher ring. You know, if you can imagine a boxing scenario, the blue corner, the red corner, buyers and sellers, they're up in their game, the buyers, and so as sellers, we've got to be on our mettle if we're going to work well with customers.
Yeah, that's right. We do indeed have to be on our mettle. You know, on the bottom of the slide throughout this discussion, ladies and gentlemen, you can see there it's entitled "What We Learned About Buyer Behavior in the GFC," the Global Financial Crisis, and hopefully you can see that we've been talking about what we did learn when that happened to us between 2008 and 2012. And there are some of the things there in front of you in summary. Decisions were getting escalated up. There were more committee-based decisions. People were harder to get hold of because there were fewer of them because they downsized. And we found that a lot more people found themselves in negotiations. Here is what else we found during the global financial crisis. And this plays right into what Peter Cooper and what Pete Evans have been saying over the last few minutes in terms of selling on value. What we figured out with buyer behavior is that the majority of them did not buy on price. There's been a lot of research done on this. Now, price was raised most of the time because it's an easy subject to raise. But in the final analysis, only 9% of them purchased on the basis of the lowest price. Now, that shocked a lot of people when we found that out, and that was research based on a sample of 6,000 people. All right, so it's a good sample size. It's a big enough sample to be deemed scientific. All right, but what we did find is that over 50% of them, I think that the number is 51 or 52% off memory, over 50% of them purchased on the basis of the sales experience. And so that then posed the question, what is it that buyers wanted during the GFC? What they wanted was not necessarily the cheapest price. They wanted value, but they didn't necessarily want the cheapest price. What they really wanted was a salesperson, a supplier who was a trusted advisor who could advise them on how to be more efficient, how to make their business better, how to make money or save money in ways that they never thought of before. They wanted to know the pulse of what was going on out there in the market with their competitors, what the other people in the industry were finding. They saw a high quality consultative salesperson as being their main conduit to getting the pulse of the economy. Pete Evans, you're familiar with the research that I'm referring to. Anything you want to add to that?
I mean, there's some great points there on the slide, and you know, I think having the sales process will really change things for you, because if you don't measure things, then you can't do the analytics to help you improve things. And I think just that last point there about negotiation, you've actually got to prepare for negotiation, because it's easy to have a conversation about price. And initially, Peter, Kath and I were on a call a couple of weeks ago where one of our clients said to us, well, clearly we're in a recession, and you know, what's the discount available? And I think the moment that somebody starts asking you for a discount and they're trying to get the conversation back to price, somewhere in your own sales process, you haven't sold the value of what your products and services bring. And I do know that we've got people on the webinar today who are operating in quite a commoditized marketplace, but even if you're selling a commodity product, you can still demonstrate the value you can bring and differentiate yourself. And that comes back to process. I mean, Alice, I could show we've got a client who sells CCTV through installers, and I was doing a strategic review with the MD a few weeks ago, and he said, actually, what you've made us realise is that our salespeople are still selling on price, but yet the installers are struggling to sell their services to their clients, and we need to offer them help and be more strategic in our selling.
Yes,
and I think
so
that,
in other words, they were helping the installers who were their customers to increase their sales to their customers.
Exactly. And I think it's understanding the challenges that your customers are facing as well. It's having a much deeper conversation. I think, Alex, you said it's a lot for a lot of salespeople. They've had it good for a number of years. It's been easy to sell in a rising marketplace, but great salespeople can sell when the marketplace is tough and have value conversations.
Indeed, that is the case. Now, Kath, I see we've got a number of questions that are coming through. This is fantastic. So maybe we don't have time to answer the questions now, but I promise you we will go over the questions, team. But Kath, maybe you'd like to highlight one or two of the questions that we'll just put on ice just for now, and we will come back to that during Q&A towards the end of the webinar. What's one or two of the questions that are coming through there, Kath?
Yeah, sure. A really interesting question from Chris. The sales are going really, really well, but the amount of effort that is having to go in prior to lockdown, so a lot of early mornings, late nights, it's really positive results, but overall exhausting and not sustainable. So I think a comment around that would be useful, Alex.
Okay, great. And one more, just so the audience can see what's coming through.
Yeah, Duncan's got in touch about how to mitigate some of the negative media storm that we're in at the moment. So I think just getting rid of some of that negativity that we're experiencing. So a bit around that as well, Alex.
Yeah, we've got some answers for that one, Duncan. Thank you. Yeah. So look, to our viewers, I promise you that if you stay on to the end, we'll have the Q&A at the end, and we'll look at those questions, and my panelists will help us to answer those questions. So hang in there while we get through this. Thanks, team. Let's push forward now. And I want to talk about that sales process and how we can use that to forecast now. Now, Pete Evans, you and I both know that there's an inextricable link between the sales process and our forecasting. Are you able just to explain for the benefit of our viewers what that relationship is between the process and the forecasting?
Well, the research that's been done by Objective Management Group shows that where salespeople follow a milestone-centric sales process, so they have a sales process which has, 4 or 5 key points in it, but underneath those points you have the key actions you've got to take under those steps. You can see an increase in sales of 15%. So actually following everyone, it is a lot, Alex, and actually what it helps you do is actually predict more accurately where your revenue is coming from, and it allows you to qualify opportunities into the process earlier on in your sales process, and you're able to go to your sales manager, your sales leader, with a more accurate forecasts.
Yeah. So if we overlay our opportunities over our process, we can see where in the process our opportunities, where each individual opportunity lies. That will give us the basis to be able to scientifically forecast what's coming through and what is the likelihood. We don't have time to delve into the ins and outs of how that works, but there is a science to this. And so that is the relationship between the forecasting and the process. But Pete Cooper, if I can come to you now, there are certain characteristics of our current sales process, if we do have one. These characteristics may need to change, or may have needed to have changed over the last 3 months, and that is the forecasting itself and the velocity. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, sure. I think Pete's just mentioned that things are changing, and therefore if you don't measure and track, it's really hard to know what's going to happen. The final bullet point here about ensuring that your data is real time, but without accurate data, can you really run and lead your business properly? No. And so we do have to get a lot closer to understanding if these decisions are going to take longer, what impact is that going to have on cash flow? What impact is that going to have on how you operate your business? And what decisions can you make confidently now in light of the way in which those changes may or may not be coming? Are you more likely to sign off some smaller deals quickly, but the longer deals may take longer. These are the types of activities that, with not only the milestone-centric process that the whole team follow, but the managers and the leaders of that sales team holding the salespeople accountable to the process. Once all of those factors come in play together, then there is a real clear understanding. You talked earlier, Alex, about clarity being really important from a leadership level. If the leaders and the managers aren't working with the people and being really clear on how their business is stacking up and forecasting accurately, then how can the leaders of the business make the important decisions?
Yeah, they need real data, don't they, in order to make those decisions? Yeah,
definitely.
That business about velocity, the second bullet point there, it's really important to, to one of the questions that Kath read earlier about how things are taking longer. We need to revise our velocity. In other words, the speed in which we go from inquiry through to close, because that impacts our forecast. You might have, pardon me, you might have a $10,000 opportunity, and it could be that before COVID, we had a 6-week sales cycle. All right, does that mean that post-COVID, we still have a 6-week sales cycle to forecast that $10,000 opportunity coming through? It could be double now. So if we don't get our velocity measurement correct, then our forecasting is going to be all wrong, because we might think it's going to come through in 6, where in actual fact, it might come through in 12. So that's one of the first things we have to revise. What is today's velocity? How long does it take our sales cycle to operate from inquiry through to close compared to now, compared to pre-COVID? That's the first thing. The second thing is with regard to the probabilities there in the first bullet point. I wonder if our audience understands that, team. I'll give you an example. If, for example, you've got your proposal to close ratio, just looking at that alone, you might know, taking that $10,000 example again, an opportunity might be worth $10,000. You might close 2/3 of your proposals. So that means your proposal to close ratio is 66% or 67%. All right, so that means instead of forecasting $10,000, if your proposal to close ratio is 67%, that means you're not forecasting $10,000. You're forecasting $6,666. That's a probability weighted forecast. I think most of our viewers probably understand that concept, but the question is, have you added science to your probabilities by basing it on your ratios? Or did you just think of a number and double it? Okay, and it could be that those probabilities have to be reworked because they may have changed in the COVID climate. Pete Evans, there's a few things that we now have to do with our pipeline as a result of this. That one of the bullet points says there, clean up your pipeline without delay. Now, look, that is really good advice. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, certainly, Alex. And I think, even before lockdown and COVID, it was really important to be doing it then as well. I think, what a salesperson should be doing is squeezing the pipeline on a weekly basis, qualifying opportunities out to the pipeline that are not going to go to the next stage of the sales process. It's so important because it allows you to identify where the potential gaps are coming in terms of you hitting your target or your budget. So, sometimes when we're working with clients, we see a lot of deals that are about to close, and that's great from, hitting your target that week or that month. But then if you've not got enough new leads or opportunities coming in at the start of your process, eventually that's going to come back to haunt you and the organization. So, I know you use this phrase a lot, Alex. It's about having a balanced pipeline with enough opportunities at each stage of the sales process.
Yeah, so we have to have it balanced, but at the same time, we have to squeeze it. So just for the benefit of our viewers who are unsure of that term, what Pete is referring to is looking and scrutinizing every single opportunity in your pipeline regularly. And I'm talking about weekly. Scrutinizing every single opportunity in your pipeline and asking yourself and your sales team, what can we do to move that forward? Squeeze it forward. And if it's a dud, then squeeze it out. So by the time we clean up that pipeline, it can be a little bit sobering because sometimes there's a lot of dead or rotting opportunities in there by the time we clean it up. Would you agree with that, Pete Cooper?
Yeah, absolutely. And a number of clients we engage with where we help show them this process will find that their pipeline can go from, say, £1 million down to 750K or 500K within the first quarter. But all they were doing were kidding themselves in the first place with a bigger number that was never realistically going to happen. So yeah, it can feel a bit scary at first, but If you don't do it, you're not dealing with real data.
Yeah, so that comes back to what you said before, dealing with real data. If we don't clean up that pipeline, and if we don't squeeze it, and if we don't balance it, then we don't have the data that we need. So if we do clean it up, we'll know, okay, we need more opportunities, or we need to move these opportunities forward, or we need to take these opportunities out of the pipeline because it's screwing up our forecast because they've been sitting there for too long. Okay, so, and if you're wondering how to do that, by the way, viewers, your Sales Star High Performance Coach can help you to do that. They're experts on this. Every coach around the world who works for Sales Star has been taught to help the customer to analyze their own pipeline on a regular basis so that from there, they'll know exactly what action has to be taken to keep it healthy. All right, so thanks very much, team. And so all of those bullet points there, we've really covered already. You know, gentlemen and Kath, you know, when it comes to revising our sales process, arguably, you could say that sales has changed more in the last 3 months than it has in the last 30 years. What do you think, team?
Alice, you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first, Pete. And while you're doing that, I'll change to this image.
Okay, yeah, I think what the last three or 4 months has done sort of during COVID is that it's accelerated changes that were probably going to take 5 years to happen. And I know, speaking to a lot of clients last year, the sort of sales leaders, sales managers and salespeople, there was a reluctance, and you come onto it on this slide, to have meetings screen to screen. Well, most salespeople have been forced into a situation, if they weren't put on furlough, that they've had to have meetings screen to screen. And I think what's interesting, talking to some salespeople, is that a lot of salespeople are saying to us, well, actually, I can't wait to go back to the old normal. And when we say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, I can just pop in and have a coffee with my customers, when the competitors are actually using the technology to sell screen to screen. And it is a skill set, but I think there's going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be a balance between screen to screen and face to face. But if you're going to have a face-to-face meeting with somebody, you've got to be having a meeting which is going to bring real value to your customer.
Yeah, well, at Sales Star, we've been selling screen-to-screen using Zoom for over 3 years now. So, you know, when furlough, when lockdown and restrictions came on, we were already well accustomed to this concept, and so are our customers. But wow, for a lot of people, that was a new concept. And during the New Zealand lockdown and the Australian lockdown, we worked with a number of clients to help them to keep on going while other businesses were just waiting for the restrictions to be lifted again. So we know who made more money during lockdown. It was the ones who changed their process to a screen-to-screen based approach. And the funny thing is, team, here's what I'm getting from a lot of my customers. A lot of them are saying, even though the restrictions have been lifted, they're going to keep screen-to-screen in their process because it's too darned efficient. It's much easier than jumping in the car and driving across town. What do you think, Pete Cooper?
Absolutely. I think, changing slightly, but to highlight the point, doctors' surgeries who now do their diagnosis via video remote are seeing levels of efficiency they could never have imagined. That's really helped them to work out which patients they need to physically see and which can be prescribed something remotely and or can seek self-help. And that process, in a completely unrelated world, has significantly revolutionized the way in which doctors, for example, work. In the world of sales, there will be some clients, absolutely, where some form of face-to-face is relevant. But for most, if you could qualify using screen to screen, how much more efficient would that be than driving 2 hours to get somewhere? Maybe the meeting doesn't go ahead, you get blown out, you don't see the decision maker or something. Driving 2 hours back again, that's a day gone for most salespeople, just to qualify out something that you could have done over a screen to screen. So getting confident with this allows you to be far more effective and efficient as a salesperson.
Yeah, for those of us who are slow on the uptake to use webcam-based meetings, I think COVID forced that upon us in many cases. And so in some crazy way, we can actually thank COVID for making us more effective. And our customers are not viewing this as some foreign idea because they've had to adapt anyway. So the concept of a webcam-based meeting is not a foreign one to most of them. So there's some questions that need to be asked as to whether or not this should be incorporated into our process moving forward. All right. The other thing is this, Pete Evans, I'll come back to you now. A lot of people during lockdown have said to us, Our leads have come to a standstill. We can't door knock anymore. We can't go and make appointments with people. And so they're beginning to realize that part of their prospecting process, we're talking about process, part of their prospecting process is to really get the mastery of platforms such as LinkedIn. Any comment on that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I know Paul O'Donoghue, our CEO, talks about, the biggest part that's going on in the world is on LinkedIn at the moment. I think there's never been a better opportunity to build your pipeline and use LinkedIn for lead generation. I know there are a lot of people who talk about, well, you should only just use it for marketing or for, thought leadership, but it's a great opportunity to reach out to decision makers. It's a great opportunity with your existing clients to widen your connections, find out who the decision makers are. And, it is a proven way of actually generating real opportunities.
It is indeed.
Even if you don't have a paid LinkedIn account, such as LinkedIn Premium or Sales Navigator, you can still use it to reach out to your prospects. You can do searches on top, companies that fall in your target market, produce a list of targeted decision makers and have a campaign of reaching out. And, it's a great way of cementing your relationships with your existing customer base as well. Because remember, if you're not using it as a prospecting tool, your competitors will be speaking to your customers online.
Yeah, indeed they will be. So it's a question of, are you going to be an early adopter or are you going to be a laggard? LinkedIn is not just a job finding website. I know a lot of people see it that way. And it's not just a way of keeping in touch with your network. It's actually, you can actually find ways to hack the algorithm to get leads. And there are ways to do this. And guess what? SalesStar coaches around the world have been taught how to do this so they can teach you. And you're looking at one of them. His name's called Pete Cooper. So Pete, you're a specialist on how to get leads from LinkedIn, aren't you?
Yeah, it's an area that we've adapted and grown and learned through, and we make mistakes and we try some things that aren't perfect. But when you understand how it works and you are respectful in how you use it with people that you operate with, then the results are back in your own hands, Alex. You're not waiting for customers to come to you. You can be proactive and you can go to the market. So yeah, there's a real step change here for those businesses and salespeople who have the drive and the determination to make a difference.
What a contrast, from my corporate days when I used to be a salesperson, and we used to have to spend 2 to 3 hours cold calling every day or making telephone calls or knocking on doors. You just imagine if you understood how to hack the algorithm, you just spent 1 hour a day doing this. You can make it rain leads. And the great thing about LinkedIn is that it is COVID-19 free. It's not subject to lockdown. You can still get hold of people. All right. So one other thing, Pete Evans, I'll come back to you this time. We talked about this before, didn't we? And we talked about buyers who are doing it tough. They've been told to cut costs. They start negotiating with us as suppliers, don't they? So what does that tell us about the need to upskill in negotiation?
Oh, I think there's a definite need to upskill yourself in negotiation. And I think the key about negotiating with somebody is to be prepared and think in advance of what questions you're going to get from your prospects and existing clients when you're going to sell them something. We know that from what's happening in the economy, that price is going to come up as an objection. Or your customers are going to be looking for discount. But if you anticipate and practice the potential objections, then actually you can get your conversations forced back on value. And if you do have to move on your price and offer something, create a win-win situation. Get something back in return. But I think the key thing to negotiation is you've got to have your walk-away position.
Indeed you do, because no deal is better than a bad deal, as they say. Hey, Pete, you've got a number of your local customers who are on this webinar right now. To your local customers there in the UK, you're already subscribing to us. Let me share with you 2 words. The 2 words are star negotiator. Remember those 2 words, star negotiator. If you are already subscribing to us there in the UK, you already have access to the library, the video library, entitled Star Negotiator. And if you log on there and go in, it teaches you 34 different negotiation tactics. including how to identify buyer tactics and how to counter those. So just think about that one, those of you who are subscribing. All right, Kath, it's time to move forward and just get the pulse of the audience once again. We've talked about a number of things. I want to know if they're going to action one thing from this last hour, what will it be? Will it be to clean up their pipeline? Will it be to revise their probabilities and velocity? Will it be to forecast more frequently, hopefully weekly, and to revise the activities in the process, such as maybe screen-to-screen meetings or LinkedIn generation, or maybe to sharpen up their negotiation skills? Now, to our viewers, I hope that you want to do all of them, but you can only pick one for the sake of this poll. All right, what's the number one actionable priority for you as a result of this hour? Are the answers coming in there, Kat?
Yep, they're all coming in. We're up to 28% now, Alex.
28%. Come on, team. You got to pick one. I know you want all of them, but you got to pick one. All right, we'll give you a 5-second countdown. Kath, how's it looking right now?
Yeah, getting up to 70%.
Okay, I think we ought to get by far the majority in 5 seconds. 4, 3. Let's close that poll and let's see the results, please, Kath.
Excellent. So there we go. We're up to 32%, which is the largest one there, which is revising activities in processes.
Yeah, that's by far the biggest one. But Kath, it's a pretty good spread across all 4 of those, isn't it?
Yeah. It does, yeah. It's 11% on Pete's important comments on negotiation skills as well. Cleaning up the pipeline, got to be really important, 21% on there as well.
Okay. Pete and Peter, 1-sentence comment from you, because we need to push on. Starting from Peter Cooper, please, 1-sentence comment.
1-sentence comment is, there are lots of things that you can do. Pick one and do it well.
So it's a starting point, isn't it, Peter?
Yeah, and then move on to the next one.
Thanks, Peter. Pete Evans, 1-sentence comment from you on the pulse of the audience here.
I think it's just interesting to see that the high percentage you want to look at the revise their activities in the process and screen meetings and LinkedIn. I think that's got to be a key. Learn the etiquette of selling screen to screen and embrace the technology, because if you don't, your competition will.
Boy, have we got a surprise for them next time we get back together in a fortnight's time. Hold your horses, I'll share that with you in just a moment anyway. All right, thanks, Kath. If you'd like to close that, it's really good to get the mood of the audience there. And I'd really like to get the mood of the audience over one more question. This is a survey this time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's really important that we practice what we preach and we give people what they want. And so we want to know, what is it that you want most of? And we'd love you to participate in the survey right now, because that will govern what we present to you in future, because we know it's what you want. Is it that you want to do a deep dive into your sales process with a high performance coach such as Peter Cooper or similar? Would you like an objective management group evaluation for your team to assess your team's mindset? What about getting my own personal executive coach if you happen to be a manager or a leader? Would you be interested in knowing more about that? Number 4, we talked about the video series. Would you be interested in subscribing to the entire video training library, either for yourself and or for your team? What about digital sales transformation? You know, we talked about LinkedIn lead generation just a second ago and screen-to-screen selling, point number 5. Is that something you'd like to know more about? And if you want all of the above, hit number 6. So the answer's coming through there, Kath?
Yeah, all coming through. Well, we're up to 32% of the attendees have voted. So I think people are thinking about this and what they'd like to look at most.
Okay, well, we're going to give you a few more seconds to make your decision there, people. Remember, the whole point of this is to give us guidance as to what our market wants to hear about from us. How are the numbers looking now, Kath?
Yeah, interestingly, we're up to 50% on the digital sales transformation. So I know you'll find that intriguing, Alex.
Yeah, indeed, especially with what's coming in a fortnight's time. I'm sure the audience can probably guess right now anyway. Okay, absolutely. Let's do a countdown now, and we'll just give people 5 seconds to get their answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2. And let's close that survey. Thanks, Kath. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our people who participated in that survey. And you said there was 55% who were interested in digital sales transformation, Kath?
Yeah, 55, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's more than half. That's very interesting. Okay, well, look, guess what we've got the next time we get back together in a fortnight's time? If you haven't figured it out by now with all the hints I've been giving you, here it is. Next time we get back together in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about just that, digital sales transformation. We're going to take a deeper dive in how to hack the LinkedIn algorithm to get leads. Will you be interested in that? We're way beyond just treating it as a networking function. We're way beyond just treating it as a job site now. We're going to show you how to get leads from it. Okay, and the second thing is we'll give you some more hacks and tips and ideas on how to use, on how to do screen-to-screen selling. There is an art to it. There are some do's and there are some don'ts. So join us again in a fortnight's time for Rock the Recovery, where we can hopefully share more tools, tips, and some gold nuggets so that you can get through the COVID-19 economy smiling. All right, well, Kath, we're now up to question time, and a number of questions have come through over the last hour. I'll leave it up to you as the moderators to maybe pick some at random, and we'll see if the panel can maybe apply some answers to some of the questions that have come through. Would you like to pick one, and we'll put it to the panel?
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting question come through from Marcus. What are the top 5 reasons why customers aren't buying at the moment?
Okay, well, look, I've got some answers in my mind, but Peter Cooper, if I could start from you, let's go to the panel. Top 5 reasons, Peter.
Yeah.
What's at least one?
At least one is inertia, and that is the fear of making a decision, the fear of getting it wrong. That is definitely happening for real with people who used to be confident, not now feeling confident to make a decision. That's definitely up there.
Okay, so inertia. Thanks, Peter. So that's that's reason number 1. Pete Evans, have you got reason number 2 there?
Yeah, I think nervousness in the economy, and I think there's a lot of fear which is overhyped by the press, particularly around the impact of Brexit.
Yeah, and I saw earlier on, Kath, we had a question about how you overcome the press-driven fear. Maybe we can maybe we can go to that question in a moment anyway.
Yeah.
Can I add to that, team? If you would like to know the number 1 reason why a sale will stall, it is not the only reason, but it is the most common reason. Would you like to know the most common reason why a sale will stall?
Yes, please, Alex.
Yeah, the answer is this. Drum roll, please. There is not enough client motivation. Just percolate on that for a second. There's insufficient client motivation. Now, what research has shown us is that 85% of decisions are emotional. That is who you buy from, who you vote for, who you date. 85% of decisions are emotional as opposed to logical. That's an oldie. A lot of us know that, but it's a goodie. So the question is, what are the 2 key emotional triggers that make a buyer motivated to take action? The 2 key emotional triggers are pain and gain. If you can, through your questioning skills, figure out how they can gain, and very importantly, more powerfully, if you can figure out the pain that they are in relevant to what you can do for them, then you will be able to unlock their motivation. Let me give an example. It could be, for example, that a building firm is experiencing unnecessary downtime because of late deliveries. Now, when there's late deliveries, that triggers a bunch of unnecessary costs, liquidated damages, labor, hiring of machinery that's been sitting there doing nothing. You can actually monetize the cost and tell them how much it's costing them. If you can monetize that cost, you can figure that out by asking them the right questions. What is the cost of this downtime? What makes up those costs? Labor, hired machinery, liquidated damages, etc. They will give you all the answers. The more questions you ask them, the more pain they are in. You are developing a motivated customer. And then once you ask them, how do you feel about that kind of loss? You're going to get some swear words. And that means that they are motivated. And then finally, when you ask them, what's your motivation to do something about this? They're going to tell you that they want to do something about it, which means they want to buy. Number 1 reason for a deal stalling. Pete or Peter, anything you want to add to that?
I'll let you go first, Peter.
Yeah, 100%. It's the right preparation before seeing a customer, understanding their needs properly by asking the right questions in a genuine and caring way to want to help the customer improve their business. And if you can provide part or all of that solution, you're the trusted partner. You need to follow that formula.
Indeed. If you can help them to increase their sales, or if you can help them to reduce their costs, that is motivation. And it is the lack of motivation that will stall a deal. in many cases, most cases. Pete Evans, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I would encourage people are on the webinar to think about being courageous earlier on in your sales process.
Mm.
And if you're courageous, you can encourage all the decision makers to be involved in the decision making process. And just circling back to what was been said earlier on in the webinar about decision stalling and things that get stuck. If you get people engaged earlier on in your sales process and the client or prospect's buying process, it's easier to sell to them at the end.
Now you hit on a very good point there. I mean, we talk about sales process, and I see in one of the comments earlier on from our audience that we're talking about the buying process as well. For our sales process to work and to minimize those stalls, we've got to understand what is their buying process. Now, Pete, we've been saying over the last hour that their buying process probably changed over the last 3 months, didn't we?
It definitely has. And I know, Alex, you use this phrase that every time you're involved, with a customer or a prospect, when you have a meeting with them, which is probably going to be screen to screen, you need to get them back to the emotional state they were in at the end of the last meeting. Mm-hmm. Because if you're not doing that, you're not actually creating the opportunity where they're actually going to buy off you and be motivated to buy off you.
Yeah, and you can just do that by doing a simple review to bring them back to that emotional state on all the problems that we talked about last time. That'll get them there, okay? But reason number 4 as to why a deal will stall is because we haven't qualified them properly. And part of qualifying them is understanding what is their new post-COVID buying process. Because if we understand what the buying process is, it may have changed, they might be escalating it up, there might be other stakeholders involved. If we understand what their buying process is, if we understand what the timelines are in that buying process, you will gain a lot more control over that sale to minimize those stalls. I think we've got time for one more question there, have we, Kath?
So you wanted to just go back to Duncan's question. He talks of in the UK, we're quite good at talking ourselves into a recession and a depression. It's not surprising that businesses are cautious about making brave decisions. So a quick tip on how to mitigate some of the negative media storm that we're in the middle of now.
Okay. I want to talk about positioning statements here. Pete Cooper, can you see where I'm coming from with positioning statements to answer that question?
Yeah, I can. I recognise it. I think my first quick tip would be watch the webinar from 2 weeks ago about positive mindset in a COVID world. And the second part, when we're looking at positioning statements, definitely you need to be leading the customer conversation in the right direction, and you need to be able to respond when a customer talks negatively about the media and move it back towards a positive outcome, a win-win type solution. So yeah, in terms of headlines, definitely moving in the right direction. You as the leader of that conversation needs to provoke and recognize when another's not there and lead them with you, take them on your journey.
Pete Evans, in just a second. Thanks, Peter Cooper. Pete Evans, in just a second, I'm going to ask you to give us an example of a positioning statement. But let me just, while you're thinking of an example, I'm going to just outline the framework for the benefit of our viewers. All right. So the framework of a positioning statement is this. Number 1, the context of it. It's generally used when trying to get the cut through that you need when you're trying to get them to agree to talk to you. Okay, so it's usually to position yourself as a trusted advisor. That's why it's called a positioning statement. And you do that as follows. The first thing you do is you state the target audience. Are you talking to a CEO? Are you talking to an H&S manager? Are you talking to an operations manager? State the target audience. The second thing that you do is you use an emotional reaction. This is important. You refer to an emotional reaction to, thirdly, a common problem. So state target audience and their emotional reaction to a common problem. Now it could be, and this is the answer to the question, it could be that the common problem is a problem that has been highlighted by the media. All right, so Pete, have you got an example of how you can string that together? Target audience, emotional reaction to common problem, possibly that's been highlighted by the media.
So one of our position statements is we work with growth-minded CEOs and MDs who are concerned about the impact that COVID will have on their ability to grow sales in the next 12 months.
Yeah. So the target audience is CEOs and MDs?
Correct.
The emotional phrase was?
Concerned.
Concerned. And the common problem, which is media driven, is
the impact of COVID on their ability to grow sales.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, fine. We're actually taking advantage of what the media is feeding us, and we're trying to get engagement, and they'll probably say, yeah, tell me about it. It has impacted on our sales. Before you know it, you've got a conversation going, they'll agree to see you. Does that make sense, team? So
Yep.
think about your target market's common problems, including the problems that are media fed. It could be over sales issues that Pete just highlighted. It could be over quality issues. It could be that your supply chain's been disrupted over COVID. So think about common problems that your target market experiences, and you can frame up a positioning statement, and you can take advantage of the fact that those common problems are media fed, but it will get the engagement that you need, so that it'll motivate them to want to see you, because you might have some answers for them. All right, we've run out of time, people. We've had time to address a few questions, and you know what? The great news is that most of the attendees actually stayed because they wanted to know the answers to some of those questions. Now, Kath, you've got those questions. You've captured all of the questions that we were unable to answer, have you not?
Yeah, there's one additional one which I think would be really worth answering, Alex, if you've got time.
Let's do one more. If people want to stay on, let's do one more. And for the rest of the questions that we don't get to, Pete, can I ask you and your team to go about answering those maybe on your LinkedIn page or something like that?
Sure. Of course, will, yeah.
Okay, that's great. So post those questions and then provide some answers. So to our audience, don't worry, we will get to you eventually if you just stay tuned via social media. All right. So Kath, what's that final question there?
Yeah, just going back to Chris's question. So sales are going really, really well. But he's having to put in so much more effort. So a lot of early mornings, late nights. So it's positive results, but the current situation is exhausting and it's not sustainable.
Yeah, I do remember that question coming through earlier, come to think of it. Pete Evans, your response to that question. So look, they're getting the sales in, but they're having to double down, and it's wearing them out.
Yeah, and Alex, I know this is a subject we've talked about internally in SalesStar. I think the key thing is that a lot of people in business who've not been furloughed are feeling fatigued. I think it's really important, coming back to the success equation, that you have clarity and you have targets, and it's really important that you do look after yourself from a mindset perspective. So, Chris, I'll respond to you directly, Chris, that I know you're still on, is that it's really important that you have targets, you have breaks from the day to day, because if you don't, you won't be any good to your customers.
So we're talking about looking after our staff's physical health by making sure that we roster them some downtime.
Yes.
But in addition to that, I think the other part of the question is there any way we can expedite some of this? Peter Cooper, any comment on that? If I just go to Pete Cooper, is there any way we can expedite some of this, Peter Cooper?
Yeah, I think that knowing where you want to take your business, recognizing how committed you are, recognizing the extra resource that may be required at this time, high quality resource that's going to get you the results that you need, and having the confidence to make those good hire decisions may help with increasing resource, which I know sounds slightly counterintuitive to some people. Are thinking, must cut costs, it's a tough time. But actually investing your money in high value, great ROI opportunities, like some brilliant salespeople and sales managers for your team, may be exactly what you need right now. And so, yeah, maybe look to grow and invest wisely at this time, and not think about, I need to save money and do more myself and take on extra workload that I just can't handle.
Thanks, Pete. And Peter, I will finish off just by adding a couple of answers to the equation here. And actually, it's a bit of a repetition, but it certainly applies to this question, and it's to the question of expediting the process. First, let me echo what Pete Evans was saying about just ensuring that your staff take some downtime to look after their health, and also just to reconnect with their families too. That's important, especially if they've been doing 3 months of doubling down. Okay, so that's the first thing. When they come back refreshed, there's one of our local team that says sleep is a weapon. So make sure that they're rested and get some downtime. That's the first thing. But to the question of how do we expedite the sales process in times like this, I've got two things to add to this discussion, and we'll finish up on these 2 points. Number one, like we said before, figure out their buying process. And you can do that by simply qualifying them and asking them the right questions. Figure out the buying process. Ask them what the buying process is, who is involved, and what the different stages are, and what the different timelines on those stages are, so that you can figure out exactly what to expect and do your follow-up accordingly. We also talked about Zoom earlier on. We've found that Zoom can expedite the process. Let me give you an example. It could be that you've got one person in one country and another person in another city, and you can't get everybody together, and so it takes ages before you can get the team together, before you can get all the stakeholders together. Zoom is the answer to this no matter what location they're in. They can all log on at the same time, regardless of where they are. You don't have to wait for everybody to fly or drive back into town. So that's something for you to think about. All right, and finally, remember what I said a few minutes ago about client motivation? If you can skillfully use your questioning techniques to find out what their pain points are, find out what their problems are, and if you're really skilled, if you know how to monetize the cost of those problems simply by asking a few questions, then you will create the motivation to expedite the process. If it's urgent, they're going to want to do something about it. I'll give you an example in conclusion. If you had health issues and you had a jar full of vitamins, and next to that you had a jar full of painkillers, if you've got a blinding headache, which are you going to take? The vitamins or the painkillers, the aspirin? I think that you know the answer is you're going to take the aspirin because you want to fix the pain straight away. Likewise, if you can identify the pain with your customers, they are going to want the figurative aspirin, which you can help provide. Find the pain, expedite the process. All right, thanks team. That's all we've got time for today. But Kath, you're going to capture those questions, the ones that remain unanswered, and you're going to post those. Can you give us some idea of where you're going to post those questions so that people can go to find the answers?
Yes, of course. So we'll be posting them on both my LinkedIn profile, on Pete's LinkedIn profile. You can also follow our Sales Star on LinkedIn as well. So please look at our website.
Yeah.
So if we could get Pete, the UK coaches, to go about answering those questions, and then we can have that, we can follow up accordingly. Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody. Thank you to my panelists, and thank you to everybody who stayed on, which is by far the majority of us, because we did run over time with that Q&A by about a quarter of an hour. Obviously, I guess Kath, they wanted to know the answer to those questions. So that's great. So look, thank you for joining us, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time on the next Rock the Recovery webinar, where we will look at digital sales transformation. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye for now. Until then.
Thanks, guys.
See you on the next call.